Welcome to The Big Break Show, a podcast where we discuss short-term rentals, entrepreneurship, life, mindset, and everything in between. Here are your hosts, Rafa Loza and Jesse Vasquez.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of The Big Break Show. I'm here with Mr. Jesse Vasquez, my co-host. Jesse, tell them, what episode is this?
Episode number 26, and today, you guys, is freaking fantastic. And I say this every time, but I promise to you guys, please listen to this episode until the end because there's a ton of information in a short amount of time. We have Mr. Aaron West, who is a real estate agent, broker, entrepreneur, life mindset. This guy has like everything that our show is about. This guy entails every single piece of that with integrity, and he also does it in a way that's very, what's the word, Rafa? He's just good at explaining knowledge and explaining things in different perspectives, and he's just really philosophical in a lot of ways that are just fantastic, man. I want to be his intern. I want to take him coffee or something, be like, yes, Mr. Aaron West, can I do it? Just to be around him because he's so smart, and you guys are going to hear it in this episode how intelligent he is in so many ways. And he just freaking interviewed Richard Branson, the dude that owns, it just was in space, right? Branson, am I saying his name right? Branson.
Yeah, the guy that owns Virgin. Yeah. Dude, I got to tell you, this guy blew me away. Probably the person I've ever resonated with the most. I'm very glad that he came on this show because it was amazing. I haven't had such a great conversation with someone on this show ever, or probably ever in life. This is how good it was. It was awesome. The guy's amazing.
Yeah.
Really, really, really humble, extremely intelligent. And he has a perspective that you're like, wow. Okay. Huge mindset, guys. So hopefully you guys enjoy this show. Without further ado, Mr. Aaron West.
What's up, guys? I am super excited today. We have Mr. Aaron West, who's actually in my backyard, not literally, but he's in the same market that I am. And this guy's been doing some really cool stuff over the last several years, actually long time, because you've been in real estate for a long time. But Aaron, talk to us, man. Let us know about what you have going on. I know you're in real estate. You have your own brokerage. You have your own team that you work with. I mean, tell us about the very beginnings, Aaron West as a child coming up in this area. Let's learn about you from the ground up, man.
Oh, I'm the oldest of 6 kids. Growing up, we kept my mom on a pedestal because that's the only way we could keep my dad away from her. And, with growing up with that many kids, we grew up fairly poor. I remember standing in line for government cheese when I was a little kid, and grew up, was born in California, lived in a couple different places, Idaho, and then Reno for quite some time, moved down to Modesto. And in 97, I was working for a jewelry store, working for a jewelry company, doing sales, and then ended up doing some training and some national training for them. And then in 2005, decided to get into real estate because, money was flowing like water at that time. And my father-in-law, who's been in real estate since the 80s, told me I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy, but you should be in real estate. So I quit my job. I was making $130,000 a year. 2 kids. I had a 6-month-old and a 2-year-old and a 2.5-year-old, and just quit cold turkey and got into real estate and had 2 easy sales, and then the market shifted and turned into work. And so I had to build my career through the bottom of the market and just kind of do it the old school way. I didn't go into the banks and represent the banks because I knew that when the market returned to a normal market, that those agents that were representing banks who had only had one client would have to start their business all over again. And I didn't want to do that. So I just kind of slogged through the market representing a bunch of buyers. And as the market started to pick up and build my business, I was really fortunate to have some really great mentors. And so started buying real estate in 2010 and have just been consistently buying. And as my business has grown, that's just been part of our wealth building journey. I have a team of 8 agents right now. We're one of the top teams in the Central Valley, and you are who you surround yourself with, and they're an amazing group of people who are just all absolute rock stars. Been married for 22 years, did Ironmans for a long time, so was really big in the fitness world. I'm not doing that anymore, so just trying to get strong as I get older. And that's Aaron in 2 minutes.
Aaron, That's a lot of info, and that's a lot of great info, man. Let me tell you, wow. I'm like, okay, where do we start off on this? That was really good. So I want to talk about first the Ironmans, right? Because I've always wanted to do one, but we'll get to that later on in the show. Talk about currently what your team does. Like, what is it focused specifically on, and what part of real estate like investing are you in? Like, what's the actual side of it?
Yeah, that's a great question. My team primarily focuses on residential real estate. That's where we've been my whole career. And as the business grew, started bringing people on, it just made sense to grow down that road. So residential real estate is what we sell. Me personally, I own a bunch of residential real estate. I own a couple of Airbnbs, one in Scottsdale, Arizona, one in Reno. We started buying last year. We bought some properties in Knoxville, Tennessee, and then also bought some multifamily and some commercial last year as well. So I've got, I'm in pretty much a bunch of different spaces right now.
So you're buying in all the right locations, right?
Trying to.
Yeah. Okay. And let me ask you another question. How, cause I hear a lot, I talk to, like I'm in a mastermind with like big multifamily guys, and the big thing that I hear from everybody is always, oh, stay away from single family. You got to scale, and you always got to do multifamily because it's a lot easier and it's a lot more scalable. Tell me what your thoughts are behind that, considering that you have a lot of single family residencies.
One of my mentors told me pretty early on in my wealth building journey. He said, "You get rich by hitting base hits, Aaron." He said there are people that go and you see the people that hit 40 home runs in a year, but they're the exception to the rule. He said the guys that are in baseball for the longest are the ones who step up to the plate and they try and hit a base hit every single time, and they're aiming between third and the shortstop and first and second, and they're able to do it consistently. They end up making way more money, and they're in the game for way longer. So I'm a believer in building a strong foundation of wealth and then taking that foundation and going big. My challenge has always been, because there's a lot of people that go big so fast, and one of my best friends talks about learned knowledge versus revealed knowledge, right? And he says learned knowledge is when you read a book on how to ride a bike. Revealed knowledge is when you go ride a bike. And I think that this market has, for the last 5 or 6 years, has been on such a meteoric rise as far as values and that kind of stuff. There are a lot of people that went big that, when this market shifts, have no revealed knowledge. So they don't know how to adapt when this market changes. And I believe that there's a lot of syndicators and a lot of guys out there that have put stuff together that when we get the shift, and it is coming, that there's going to be some people that find out that it's not as easy to do as it is to, when money's flowing freely, it's easy to get a bunch of guys with money. But I'm here to build wealth and be wealthy, 50 years from now. So for me, it's just a consistent, and as the wealth has grown, the base hits get bigger. But that's all I'm ever trying to do, is hit a base hit. And then every once in a while, I bought duplexes at $46,000 in 2011 that are worth $375 or $400 now. So they're home runs now. But when I bought them, they were just base hits. They were, I was struggling. I had just enough money to put the 25% down on $50,000. And that was a base hit to me. So I think that if you have that mindset of, and Gary Vee says it too, he says, people want to get rich quick, but life is long. And so it's all about just building that foundation. And then once you have that foundation, then you can go big, because you don't have to worry about getting spanked. But I think there's a lot of people that go big real fast that are going to get spanked.
I love that, man. That analogy was great for sure.
Yeah, I know. I'm a big baseball guy.
I'm a Giants fan.
All right, cool. We could stay on the podcast then. Dude, you said something super cool. Like, I think you're right on that. When you have that mindset that, if you just want to take, and you're right, baseball, 3 at-bats out of 10 is considered some of the greatest baseball players of all time. You're going to have 10 at-bats and you hit the ball 3 times. Doesn't matter where it goes. But all you need to do is make those little tiny moves, tweaks. You got to change your situations on what you're doing. So now I'm talking, let's talk about this for a second. With the market right now, because there's always people that are saying, yes, there's going to be a crash. And there's other people that are saying like, no, there's no way, we were in 2007. It's not the same thing. So can you give me your take on what the market is and if you're buying right now?
I am still buying. Matter of fact, one of the guy that owned the house in Scottsdale just texted me and was like, hey, let's buy a place in Asheville. And I said, let's go buy a place in Asheville. Again, the people that bought in 2005 or 2006, 2007, when the market crashed, they only got hurt if they sold in 2010. I have a bunch of clients and friends that bought in 04, 05, 06. They've paid down equity for 20 years and their house is worth more. So if you're playing the long-term game, it doesn't matter when you buy. Rates are still super low. My vision of where the market is and what I see happening is, and I've been listening to a lot of guys and talking to a lot of people who are way smarter than I am. And it is fundamentally different than 2007. We're in a housing shortage. And until supply equals demand, there can be no crash. Now, where the market I see is going to shift is as interest rates start to rise and the Fed continues to raise the rate, because the Fed's going to continue to raise the rate until the S&P 500 cracks. Everybody put their money into Google and Apple and Tesla and all of that, and that market has been very resilient, but there's trillions of dollars that the Fed needs to buy back because of what they printed. So they're going to continue to raise rates until that market gets put in check and that money disappears, because when there's a 15 or 10% pullback on Tesla and all of those stocks, now trillions of dollars have disappeared from the market that people don't have access to. And that's when we'll start seeing, I believe, a normalization of whatever the rate is at that time. Now, in the real estate market side of things, I think as they raise these rates, we're going to see a slowdown in the market. But there's just, frankly, too many buyers that qualify at 6 and 7 and 8% still that will be able to keep this market going, that there's just nothing in the works short of a black swan event that would cause the market to pull back in any dramatic way at all. We may see a flattening and a slowing down, but unless something goes sideways and we see hyperinflation or like Jimmy Carter stuff where you've got these crazy things happening, there's no indicators that this market is going to be doing anything but staying on the path that it is on a slower level.
Yeah, you're right. I looked at this this article. It was not that long ago, and it was talking about the housing over the last decade. Like we've had the fewest. I think there's only like 10 million houses that were built over the last decade. And if you go back in the 90s, 80s, 70s, there was literally like, I don't know, 33 million. I wish I had the numbers in front of me, but it literally is, it's like 1/3 of what the housing construction
and the
used to be.
challenges too is that everything else is getting so much more expensive. You know, lumber and labor and all these other things are getting more expensive. So to build new homes, which is where the balance in the market is going to come from, that continues to get more expensive. So as those, just the cost of those goes up, the retail market and the resale market is going to drift up. They're always the ceiling on the market. New homes are always the ceiling, but as those prices become more expensive just because of inflation and the cost of doing business, that still allows the residential market to continue to gain in value.
Yeah, I agree. They're building literally around the corner from my house here is a new development of, I think, like 60 something new townhouses. And I kid you not, what was it? 9 months ago, townhouse here was going for like 485. These new constructions, they're starting at 855. And I'm like, dude, what is going on? The house literally across the street from me, they picked it up at 555 last year. And the lady, I was talking to her and she's like, you know what? The market's so good right now. We just put about $50,000 to rehab this place. And they just put it up for sale yesterday morning, $959. I was like, I'm buying something here, like ASAP, right? And I wish I would have done it last year. And it's true, dude. I went to get coffee yesterday, and it was an $8 cup of coffee. And I'm like, what happened to the $6 coffee I was drinking the entire year? I was like, okay, avocado toast is now $9. You kidding me? So you're right. And you know, in the simplest form too, Aaron, I think it's a simple supply and demand still, right? There's no housing anywhere. people are putting up houses left and right, and they're flying off the market.
I have one of my friends that builds build to rents at a pretty high level. So they go into markets in Florida and Alabama, Georgia, and they'll build developments of 100 or 200 houses. And he's having to go back, and then they pre-sell them, and then they build them. And so what they've had to do, I think 3 times this year already, is go back to the buyers and say, hey, fortunately rents have raised. It still pencils out the same way, but the cost of this house has gone up by X% because all of the other costs have. So that's just the new normal that we're going to be in for the foreseeable future. I think is new homes are going to continue to rise, and then you're right, it's the housing shortage.
Yeah.
I feel like almost like people are scared to, like these guys that go in and they're almost scared to build property. They're scared to build. Like they don't know what's going to happen. I mean, I don't understand it. Like Aaron, we're both from the same area. You remember, like even like 5 years ago, there would be new developments that would come up, and then there would be nothing for like years and years. So like since 2010, I haven't really seen a whole lot of development. I mean, the east side of Modesto, a little bit in Turlock, but nothing what it was like. I grew up in Turlock. I was born and raised in Turlock. And nothing like it was when I was growing up, in the 90s, 2000s even. There was just places all over but you don't see that happening anymore. It's not like that.
Well, and I think part of it too, and this is nationwide, is that it was so easy to build. And these guys built so many houses in 5, 6, and 7 that a lot of these communities and towns and states, when the market crashed, said to themselves, well, we need to make it harder for people to build so this doesn't happen again. And now they're running into people, there are developers that want to build, but it's become so much more difficult to be able to do it. So I think that's part of it, and that's starting to change as well. But listen, I think that we are in an amazing market right now, and if you're playing the long-term game, we're still rates at 4, 5% are still dirt cheap. And if you can pencil it out, and there's 2 ways to build wealth, or there's 2 ways to invest. It's cash flow or appreciation. I've always been an appreciation buyer, because my business pays for my life. That everything I've purchased has been an appreciation. Us going out to Knoxville is more of a cash flow play. So I think as long as you're really clear about what your vision is or what your wealth building vehicle is, and you're playing it for the long-term game, you just can't lose. You just have to make sure that you're hitting base hits.
And Aaron, let me ask you a question, because I've always been a cash flow investor. Now I'm getting more into the actual appreciation side of things, which is what I'm trying to really push hard on the purchasing side. How does a cash flow investment look for you? Like, what do you look for specifically? Since you said going to Nashville, I was in Nashville a couple months ago and it was super expensive still. Oh, it's getting really expensive again. But
well, I'm in Knoxville, not Nashville. Nashville's really expensive.
Oh, gotcha.
Knoxville's still emerging. So, for me, again, it's a long-term play. So if I don't need 10% cash on cash for it to make sense. If I'm 6, 7%, I'm getting pay down, I'm getting appreciation. Big picture, I'm making good money on these properties. Like I said, I'm new to cash flow investing, and I really don't even really like doing it, truthfully, because appreciation can be turned into cash flow anytime you want to. So I still continue to buy, looking for appreciation, because I don't need the money today. So whenever I need the money and need the cash flow, it's easy to turn $2 or $3 million into cash flowing. I mean, there's a ton of funds. You can go out and buy a bunch of property that cash flows. You can turn that into cash flow at the drop of the hat. You can't turn cash flow into equity and appreciation. They're just 2 totally different things. So I'm starting to train. I'm actually selling for my duplexes here in the next couple of months, and I'm turning that money, because I have so much equity in those, I'm turning that into a cash flow investment. And I don't know if it'll be multifamily, if it'll be commercial, but I'm using that equity now to up my cash flow game so that I can speed up the clock on being able to buy more properties.
Yeah, I love your perspective. I've never thought about it that way, because from the very beginning, for me, it was cash flow. But mainly when I started, I didn't have much, so I need to get out, like generate revenue to cover bills, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, I love that different perspective. Can I, Jesse? Did you have another question? Because I kind of wanted to shift the topic here. Cool, because I want to talk about now that we're talking about cash flow and money, I know before we started the recording here, you said that you wanted to touch on something very important that we haven't had here on the show before, and it's the value of money, or the relationship with money.
Yes.
Can you talk about that, please? I'm very, very interested to hear your thoughts and what you have to say about that.
So, full transparency, I out earned my spending for 40 years. You know, my dad was comfortable being broke. So many of us that are, you know, grew up poor, I guess, or with a scarcity mindset. I work better with my back against the wall, right? And that's how a lot of us grew up. That's what we're comfortable with. And part of your back being against the wall is that you're broke, so you have to work. And so I would make, you know, when I started working at the jewelry store, I was making $17,000 a year. When I left it, $135,000 a year. I was just as broke because I had a scarcity relationship with money. I was afraid of having money. And I'll never forget, I was talking to a mentor of mine, and I said, Brian, and who's very wealthy. And I said, Brian, I don't understand what's going on. I know how to make money. I can't keep money. And he looked at me and he asked me one question. And he said, Aaron, what's your dad's relationship with money? And I felt like someone had punched me in the stomach, because it was the very first time in my life, literally in my life, that I looked at myself and said, I'm simply repeating the train tracks that my dad had laid down for me, that his dad had laid down for him. And it started this whole journey for me of how do I become comfortable with money? And during that journey, I've really figured out that spenders have a bad relationship with money and savers have a really bad relationship with money. And both of them come from a place of fear. Everybody talks about savers, and Dave Ramsey's like, pay your house off and for savers, money is security. So once they have that money and they take ownership of that money and it goes into their savings account, you can't pry it from them, because that's where they find security, is in that money. So it doesn't matter if it's the best deal out there. They're like, oh no, if this is coming out of my savings, I'm not willing to take the risk. So savers are very risk averse, whereas spenders have the exact opposite problem. We're like, oh, I'll take a flyer any day. If it means that I have to get rid of this money, I'll take a flyer and see what happens. And so again, a lot of what I say is just what other people have told me, and mentors and friends have talked about as this journey has gone. And one of my friends talked about the difference between ownership versus stewardship. And he said that, and the illustration that I would use is this. So when someone gets $1 million from the lottery or inherits $1 million, what do they typically go do? They go buy a house, they buy a car, they go on a vacation, they go and do all these things because they take ownership of that money. And statistically, I think it's 95% of people who win the lottery or inherit money are broke or in the exact same place they were before within 5 years. So I'm going to flip that scenario and go, you're talking to your best friend and he comes to you and he says, Jesse, I just found out I have terminal cancer and I have a life insurance policy that's $1 million. I'm going to will you that $1 million for you to take care of my daughter who's 5, so that when she gets older, she can have the life that she deserves. You're going to make very different decisions with that money. You're going to invest it wisely because you have stewardship of that money, right? And so the challenge for most of us in our lives is that there's no clear separation between the money that we own and the stewardship money that we have. So the way that I started building wealth once I figured this all out was I created an account, because I'm a spender, that's called my Not My Money account. And literally, I went into the bank, and it's a savings account, but when you're online, you can change the name and name it a tax savings. I literally named it Not My Money, and I made the commitment to myself that any money that went into that account was not mine. It was for Aaron, who I wanted to be and who I had the potential to be when it came to wealth. And then what would happen over time is I would make deposit. Every time a house had closed, that part of that would go into that. And then I started seeing momentum with that, so the numbers got a little bit bigger. And then I had enough and I made my first investment. And then I was broke again. So I had to go back through and start that whole process because that's what I was comfortable with. So as soon as I had enough where I was like, oh, I got to do something with it, I found a place to go put that. With savers, it's the same mental game that they have to play. Is they have to not take ownership of that money. So for savers, the challenge is when I get a paycheck or when I get a commission or whatever that looks like, where am I going to put money to where I can tell myself that I don't own that money so that I am comfortable with putting that money into an investment or putting that money into a place. So I think the challenge, and it's a lifelong journey, you know, I have wealth now. I don't ever need to work again for the rest of my life. And when I did my goals this year, I came to the realization that, you know, and part of it is I've never met a real estate deal that I didn't like, right? So I have wealth, I'm making money, I have money in my bank accounts, but I had missed that discipline again of that not my money account. And so this year I went in and I created a not my money account that is simply there for me to feel like a saver, where I'm not touching it. I don't care if inflation goes up at 10%. That money is a discipline for me to continue to improve my relationship with money. Does that make sense?
Dude, yes, absolutely. I love that. You know, there's
Definitely.
two I'm kind of similar to you. I'm also kind of a little bit scared of it as well because if you look at my savings account, there's probably like $500 in it. Because anytime I get a certain amount of income or money in that account, even in my business account, I'm like, all right, where can I go invest this? Like, I can't see it sitting there. I'm like, I need to go put it into something, right? And the opposite side though, like my personal spending, like if I go and I charge up my credit card or I do something, I can't stand seeing the debt there. And I have to feel like I have to pay that off right away. And sometimes I have to look at my account and go, well, I don't have anything here because I've already spent it. Right. And I have like my regular income where I make to like survive. Sometimes I overspend a little bit more. Right. And then on the other side, I see friends that are like, I'm like, hey, dude, you guys got to invest with me. Like I got these good opportunities. And they're like, you know, we've been saving this for a long time and I can't touch it and I don't want it. And I'm like, dude, the opportunities behind this are huge. Right. So I love that you brought that up. And as far as your, I love the idea. I might actually copy you on that. Not my money. I do something similar, but not like that at all.
It's
I have
awesome.
yeah. So I do a profit first system. So I take a percentage off of my all revenue and I put it into the account and I don't touch it till the end of the year or when it gets large enough for me to pull out of, and then I can go spend into something. And so, but I like that whole, hey, you know, don't touch it until you can do something with it. Or maybe even for like when I get older, right? Like some kind of spending money.
And you know, I did the exact same thing. I mean, with my business, my wife and I were on a salary. We've been on the same salary for 5 years now. We figured out a number that was a good lifestyle for us. And then we just paid ourselves that. And then all the money that was in my business account above that, I just looked at that as not my money until like what you did as an investment. I think the challenge for us though is it's constantly evolving that relationship with money and being intentional about it. So for you, it may be that not my money account where you just say, you know what, no matter what, I'm not touching this money. It's going to be X amount of dollars. Once I get it to that place, I'm good. I don't need more than that. And then from there, then you continue playing that game. But it's creating those disciplines so that when opportunities present themselves, you're okay with saying no also, because that's part of the discipline of building wealth. And it was one of my challenges is that it's really hard for me to say no if I see opportunity, but saying no leads to a yes. So when you create that discipline of that not my money and you tell yourself, no, I'm not going to spend it, it creates other disciplines that your brain is now able to do because you've started that, you've worked that muscle there. So for me, it's been really helpful to help me say no by putting that discipline in place and not spending that money.
Got it. I love that. One last question around this too. Do you have a certain percentage that you do into your not my money account, or is it just like a certain amount of revenue? How do you work that?
You know, I just have committed to do something out of every time I get paid. So with my business, we get commission checks all the time. I only cash them once a month. So when I go in, depending on what the month looks like and how much the business is spent and how much is left over, some months it's big and some months it's small, but I've just committed that there's always something. A lot of it just depends on how comfortable I am with where I am at that particular moment. But it's kind of crazy because, you know, I have a bunch of accounts now, you know, bank accounts, and like I had a couple months where business wise, we spent a lot of money. We did a ton of stuff and spent a lot of money. And I was feeling a lot of stress. And then when I got online and looked and I saw those two not my money accounts, one business and one personal, I was like, oh no, I'm good. I'm good because I have this here as my little nest egg that I'm not touching. So I'm good. So
Yeah.
I think it's just a matter of making a commitment to do something out of everyone and then adjusting it as you feel more comfortable with it.
Got it. Yeah, it's an always evolving relationship. Even now, like sometimes I choose not to pay myself during a month because I'm like, if I get that money, I'm gonna end up spending it. And it's still like a thing in my head where I'm like, I gotta be disciplined to be able to say, hey, stop, like leave that there, don't touch it, let it sit. Something else is going to come up eventually where you can do something with it. But yeah, man, I love that. Thanks for bringing that up.
You bet.
Yeah. This leads me to our mindset because you keep talking about like consistency and, learning. How did you have that shift in your perspective with consistency and mindset and money? And like, where did that come from? I mean, you talked about going from the sales job, jewelry to real estate. At what point in your life did you have that like boom shift?
Yeah. There's a couple of shifts that have happened in that I've had to change my mindset in how I look at wealth and we were talking beforehand, Jesse. You are who you surround yourself with, right? So I was really fortunate. There's a group that a mastermind that I'm in called GoBundance, and we've talked about this before, where you're surrounded by a bunch of millionaires, and that's what you have to be in it. And that's who you're talking to. And so being in that group and seeing how much we limit ourselves, right? Like, Jesse, what your world is your world. And we all have our own bubble of what we find is normal and what reality is. But the truth is that when we see someone else who's not any smarter, not any better looking, come from the same circumstances, who has built a bigger life or has made decisions that have exponentially improved their wealth or their life or their relationship, it forces you to address who you are. And are you thinking big enough? I'm a huge goal writer. The very first time I wrote goals, the guy who was having us do the goals had me write it was a 5-year vision. So it was 2007, right when I got into real estate. Had me write a 5-year vision. And he said, it's 2012. Where are you? Who are you hanging out? What does your business look like? All this stuff. And in 2007, I was flat ass broke as a joke, man. The market was turning. I was new in real estate. I didn't have momentum. It was work, right? So when I wrote this 5-year vision, I was like, we're at our cabin in the mountains. My business is I think I put $10 million worth of gross sales. And I wrote all this stuff, how many transactions I did, all that kind of stuff. And I never looked at it again. And in 2019, I guess, I was doing a thing for my clients for goal writing because it is such a big part of my life. And so I was going through all of the different pamphlets and stuff that I've gone from all the events that I've gone, and I came across that. And to the dollar almost, every single thing that I had written in 2007 was exactly where I was in 2012. The only thing that was different, we had the cabin in the mountains. I mean, everything was exactly the same. The only thing was different was who I was hanging out with. And I remember thinking to myself, why didn't you think bigger, Aaron? That was like the first thought that went through my head was, why didn't you think bigger? And so by surrounding yourself with people who do think bigger or are farther down the journey than you are, it gives you the opportunity to be pulled in their wake to a bigger life for yourself.
Yeah, we've talked about this over the last probably 2 or 3 episodes, Rafa, that they haven't even aired yet. But every person that we've seen that's been super successful has literally said that exact same thing that you just brought up right now. By who you surround yourself, Rafa just went to what's that guy's name, Rafa?
Tim Brotz's mastermind.
Tim Brotz, I'm not sure if you're familiar with him, but how important is it to be a part of masterminds, Aaron? Like, what do you think? You've had we talked about before, the shift in your mind, just being around those people.
This is investors. You're this podcast is going out to, right? So this is all people that are trying to build wealth. I've made from one conversation that I had with one person from a mastermind, I've made over $1 million from one conversation. And I was struggling with something, and I just said, "Hey man, how do you address this?" And he gave me a dialogue, and it's how I started flipping houses, because I have this huge database of clients that come to me in that, this scenario that the mom died, the house is run down, and I was always looking out for what I thought their best interests were, and really not being my own first investor and best investor first, and then also not finding out what their pain is. And for a lot of people, they just don't want pain. So it was like, I'm an investor. I have friends who are investors. Would you be interested in an all cash offer that closes in 14 days that just makes this go away? Some of my best clients, I've bought houses at screaming deals, who still refer me, who still do business with me, because their pain was in such a place that was the best thing that could have happened to you, and we created a win-win. And from that, I've made at least $1 million from that one conversation. And the partnerships that I have on the deals that I have are the deals that I did in the last 12 months, almost all of them were partners with people that I met from a mastermind, created a relationship with, their boat was going in the same direction as mine. And we said, why don't we both get in the same boat and stick our oars in the water and go faster? And so all of these opportunities that present themselves from masterminds, and you have to go into it with the right space too. I mean, if you go into a mastermind going, what am I going to get out of this? You're never going to get anything out of it, because the rule is give, ask, receive. So if you go into these things going, how can I provide value to these people? And the thing that's funny about people new into the world of masterminds is it's really easy to play the comparison game. Be like, oh, that guy's worth $10 million or 50 or $100 million or whatever it is. I could never bring value to him. And that is so not true. One of my good friends is worth $150 million. I'm never going to be able to give him advice about business or money, right? Never. It's just, he's so far ahead of me down the road on that he is my mentor for that. But he has a 4-year-old little boy that he had the reason he's worth $150 million is because he had a jacked up relationship with his father. So he has no idea what being a dad looks like. So I've mentored him and hung around with him, and he's seen how I interacted with his boys, and we're close friends because I was able to bring him value in a place that he didn't have an expertise. So when you go to these masterminds or you go to these places, there's always something you can learn from somebody, and there's always something that you can provide value to somebody else. But if you're not in those rooms, you don't get the opportunity to give or receive.
Aaron, I have a lot of thoughts behind this. So I've actually been to a GoBundance gathering. One of my, he's kind of a good friend of mine now. He's actually in GoBundance also.
Who is
and
it?
It's funny that you say that. His name's Alvin. He's here in Southern California.
Alvin Huey?
I think that's his last name. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I know Alvin. Actually,
okay,
he
cool.
just texted me the other day.
That's funny. Yeah. Really short dude.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, super cool. Yeah, dude, I love him. So I met him at a virtual real estate meetup 2 years ago, and it was just having a conversation like this because you know how they throw you in these Zoom rooms.
Yes.
And you have conversations, and I started talking about what I do, short-term rentals and stuff like that. And he was kind of intrigued, and I didn't know what he did at the time. Then we had maybe a 5-minute call. We go back into the Zoom call. Anyway, the reason I bring it up is because when I found out what he did and the amount of business he does and just how knowledgeable he is, I was like, bro, I'm over here spewing my nonsense about short-term rentals and Airbnb, and you're over here you're up here. I'm down here. And then you flip it around. He calls me all the time for short-term rental questions, and we talk about it all the time. And we follow up and have just regular, hey man, how you doing today? How's business going? Hey, I'm going to this property. You want to come look at it? Hey, I'm thinking of doing this. What do you suggest I should do? And we're always bouncing off ideas. And I'm when I first found out what he was doing, I'm man, I'm out of this guy's league. What am I going to bring value to him? And on the contrary, I think he likes talking to me because he sees my perspective of specific things, right? And from both sides. And so anyway, where I was going with this was you never know, same thing what you were saying, you never know who you're going to help out in what way or in what direction that relationship's going to go no matter what. When I went to this, it was this mastermind thing that I went to, This dude, Tim Bratz, he owns like 4,000 doors, right? He's like a big syndicator apartment guy. Really cool. I signed up because I saw that they had an opening and I'm like, oh my God, yeah, I want to go to this, be around a lot of very successful people. And so I signed up, I went, and I was like the small fish in the room. And I went in there thinking, man, I don't know what I'm going to do here, right? We've had two people on the show that came in that I met there. I'm working a deal with one of them right now. And the guy that was like one of the dudes that was there, like top notch, we interviewed him a couple weeks ago. He owns, I think it's like 2,200 doors in self-storage, like mobile homes, like like all this stuff. Yet he stuck around me the entire time because he wanted to hear my perspective again behind short-term rentals. And I own one duplex. I have 45 short-term rentals, but they're all arbitrage, and I own one duplex. I'm like, nobody's going to want to talk to me. But going back to it, it's the value that you bring. You never know what you're going to provide, but you got to go in with the mindset of, hey, I'm here to build a relationship and look for something specific. Not, I'm just going to show up and go, well, I wonder what's going to happen here, because then you're just going to sit quietly and no one's going to talk to you, right? And vice versa. There's also at this event that I went to, there was 2 or 3 guys who brushed me off and they didn't want to talk to me, and that was fine. But it's not that maybe we just didn't click. Maybe that the relationship didn't work out.
And it's funny because two things. The most successful people that I know, and I've been really fortunate to interview some crazy people. I mean, I spent an hour a couple of weeks ago, and I mean, Jesse saw it. I mean, I was on Necker Island and interviewed Richard Branson for an hour, right?
Wow.
Richard Branson was asking questions of me because successful people are constantly looking for a new perspective or new information. And I was reading this the other day. My wife actually was reading the book, and she read this to me, and I can't remember who it was, but he said, I can tell how successful somebody is by one question. And she told me what the question was. What do you think the question is that someone can tell if you're going to be successful or not with a really high certainty by your answer or you asking the same question? Do you guys want to throw a guess at it? What do you think?
What's the square root of 100?
Close.
Go ahead, Aaron. I don't want to give a dumb answer.
It's do I ask for help? And the thing that I've found is that wealthy people, truly successful people, ask for help on everything. Because there's no reason, and it's the challenge that we have to get out of our own way with that ego and with all of this stuff going, I'll figure it out by myself. The reality is there's a ton of people out there that want to help you be successful, but you just have to ask for help, right? If you don't ask for help, they're not going to help you. And then you have to follow up and do something with that information that they give you. And then, and because this is another thing, and this is kind of a tangent, but when you meet with somebody who's more successful than you, they will always do one thing, and they will give you a piece of homework every single time. It may be, I listened to this podcast, or you should read this book, or whatever it is. And that's a test, because successful people get hit up by sayers all the time. And there's sayers and there's doers. Successful people are doers. And they want to help other doers be successful, but they're going to test you to find out if you're a sayer or a doer. And if you meet with somebody who's ultra wealthy or ultra successful, or even just a little more than you, and they say, the best book that I probably ever read was this, and you read that book and you call them 2 weeks later and say, hey, I just want to let you know I read that book. It was amazing. I'd love to sit down with you again and kind of go over some of the things that I got out of it. And I'd love to hear what your perspective is. With 100% certainty, they will meet with you because you just showed that you're a doer. And so I think that's one of the things that joining these masterminds is one of the ways that you show you're a doer. So when you come to a mastermind, the people that are there that are all doers, you're one of them just because you took action. And so I'm a huge believer in the masterminds and, getting together groups of super successful people, because they all interact with each other and they're all doers. And when they see you're a doer, they will open up their whole lives and their whole world and all their secrets to you. I'm in a group right now where I don't flip professionally. It's more of a happenstance thing. But I met this group of guys, and so they invited me into their bi-weekly call, and there's 10 guys who flip, they all average between 60 and 300 flips a year. So they're flipping at a really high level, right? They know that I'm hungry. So every 2 weeks, they go over all of their numbers. What's working, what ads are working. They're sharing postcards, they're sharing videos, they're sharing everything at all. But I'm a doer, so they're like, come on into our world. And all I have to do, I'm thinking about, there's a market that I'm thinking about going into that all I have to do is call any of those guys and say, hey, I want to fly out. I want to go over everything with you. And they're like, come on out. And they would just open their books up to me because I'm a doer and I'm a giver at the same time. So that's reciprocal. I'm sorry. I went on a rampage for a minute.
Please
there,
continue.
so.
This is really good, man. I appreciate you sharing all this with us. You know, one of my biggest flaws is asking for help. It really is. I'm always the type of person who thinks they can always figure everything out themselves, or at least tries until it fails, and then you have to go ask for help. Like I always do that, right? But it's taken me a long time to realize what you just said now, slowly. And it's again, it goes back to who you're around and the mindset that you're with, right? I've always been figure it out or do it yourself, or go out and put in the work yourself and then figure it out and then do it yourself. Never who can help me get there the fastest, who can help me get from point A to point B easier. It's never been that way because I've always thought that it was a bad thing. And now that I've been around these groups and these people and these masterminds, it's like now when I have a question that I don't have an answer to, rather than me sitting here and trying to figure out the hard way, all I do is go and ask a question to whoever might be the right person to answer it. And I kid you not, it's helped me get from like point A to point B so much faster. I've grown my business so much bigger over the last year from this one thing, getting uncomfortable with asking for help. It's a big thing for sure. So yeah, man, I appreciate you sharing that.
And it is, nothing will accelerate your growth faster than getting out of your own way. We are always the biggest stop gaps to our business. Always. My business should be 3 times the size that it is, doing 3 times the volume that it's doing right now. I prevented that from happening. And so when you get that perspective, and the reason that my business is where it is today is because someone gave me perspective and gave me permission to get out of my own way, because in my world, I was the hunter. I was the best hunter that there was, right? And so I had agents on my team that are amazing agents, but I was like, no, I'm the hunter. And I stepped out of production 100% last year. I haven't sold a home in a year, and my business increased by 25% over that same period of time because I got out of my own way. So when you ask for help and you ask for perspective and you hear how these other guys are doing things, and you realize that you're really not that big of a deal, it also becomes a whole lot easier to ask for help because we're not that big of a deal.
I love that. I absolutely love that for sure. Jesse, I want to shift it again now. I want to get a little more personal here with Aaron. Any last questions on this?
Yes, I do. I want to ask him about Richard. What was that like connecting with him, like sitting there with somebody like that? Like, you know,
it was really cool. We actually got to spend a fair amount of time with him. We were there for 4 days. I went on a bike ride with him. He's 73 years old and one of the fittest humans I've ever met in my entire life. He's already been to space. So but crazy fit. I mean, I said I did Ironman, so I stay pretty fit and ride bikes a lot. And he took us on this bike ride that was a 10-mile bike ride around this little island in the British Virgin Islands, but it had 2,600 feet of climbing. I mean, it was either straight up or straight down. And there was 11 of us that went on the ride with him, and only two of the 11 beat him. And I literally turned myself inside out so that I could beat Richard Branson. I mean, but he is an introvert. You wouldn't know it by all the crazy things that he's done. He's wicked smart. He's very philanthropic. I mean, all his businesses have a philanthropic side to them, which really impressed me. And, by giving, opportunities opened up to him. And so that's always been something that's important to me. And that was really nice to hear. How that has helped him build his business was by being generous and by looking out for those that weren't as helpful. But yeah, just a good guy. I mean, he was really nice. We ate dinner with him one night, and my wife was on a walk and he was on a run, and he stopped and talked to her for a while. So, I mean, I have nothing but good things to say about Richard.
That's awesome, man. That's super cool.
And I have a cell phone number, which is even cooler.
Oh, yeah. There it is. Yes.
All right, go ahead and lay it out here. We won't text him, but that's awesome, man. I think it's really cool that how did that even happen?
It was well, it's been on my bucket list for a long time, and we do this, and this is a tangent, so I'll keep it short. But in GoBundance, myself and another guy, we have a
Right.
show we call 728, and it's only live for 48 hours. It's where we have people who are. It's the journey from 1 million to 10 million. Because that's where the work really happens, is that hunt to 10 million. Once you get to 10 million, you have a momentum of money, and money starts working for you instead of you working for the money. So we've been doing that show for a couple of years now, and it's only live for 48 hours so that the guys that can come on who would never share their whole story, they share their finances. They literally pull up their personal financial statement, and we go line by line through it and talk about where their money is and why it's there and what they do and all that. But so it was through GoBundance, and so what I did 3 months before, I thought to myself, if you don't ask, you don't get. So I reached out to the BVI, or the Virgin United people, and said, hey, I would like to interview Richard for the 728 show. And so we didn't hear anything. And literally the day before we flew out, I got a call from the CEO of GoBundance that said, Virgin gave you the go-ahead to do the interview for Richard Branson. So that's how that happened. It was through a GoBundance thing that they had set up.
Wow. Yeah.
That's so awesome. Dude, that's crazy. See, ask and you shall receive, right?
That's exactly right, man.
That's cool, man. Speaking of how fit you guys all are, and Richard Branson over here killing everybody on the bike, is what I wanted to actually ask about. How is this whole Ironman thing? Because I know I told you I'd bring it up, and I got it because I've always had it on the back of my mind that I've always wanted to do one, and I never do. Right. And I'm probably in the worst shape I've ever been in my life right now because I stopped working out after COVID, after years of nothing but training. I'm curious, how did you get into that? Like, if you don't mind getting to more of the personal side of things now.
No, that's, I got into triathlon and Ironman and started that whole journey because of the worst athletic experience I've ever had in my entire life. My neighbor across the street did triathlons and Ironmans, and I was biking and running, and I was, pretty fit. I was 30 years old and fit, and he was like, you should come do a triathlon with me. And I was like, I can do that. And so I grew up in the water skiing and that kind of stuff. So I was like, I'm comfortable in the water. So I went and did this race, and there's a huge difference between growing up in the water and knowing how to swim. There's a big difference. And so in this race, it was a super, super short race, and the water just killed me. And I got my ass beat by 60 and 70-year-old women. I mean, I was getting passed left and right on the run, and I thought, I can't go down like that. And so I started training and came back, and then, your body is an amazing, amazing machine. You could do an Ironman in 6 months. If you told your body that's what you wanted to do, and then you got coaching and outside perspective to make sure you don't injure yourself. Our bodies are one of the most beautiful things on the planet, and they will adapt to whatever it is we tell them to do. And Ironman gives you a discipline and allows you to go to a dark place mentally that most people don't ever get an opportunity to go, because anytime you do a race that's an endurance race, you make mistakes, and when you're doing an endurance race, those mistakes are compounded tenfold. So you go invariably at least one point in the race, you go to a dark place where you've got to say, hello, my friend Suck. It's nice to meet you, and we're going to spend some quality time together. And so you learn a lot about what you are capable of, and that your brain gives up before your body does. And that's a discipline that translates to everything else that you do. It's most people give up when there's adversity, but when you're doing triathlon and you're training your body and you're doing these long rides and these long runs, you have to learn that adversity doesn't mean no. It just means you may have to adapt to get through that adversity. And so it transfers through to life. But I mean, I've done a bunch of half Ironmans, a bunch of Ironmans, and It has given me a mental discipline that I think has served well through this whole journey that we're on.
Aaron, man, I love your perspective behind everything. And there's a reason why I asked that, why I asked you this question about the Iron Man, because I know it's a big mental challenge. And I was curious as to what you were going to say, how it affect. That was going to be my next question. You actually answered it. Is how how does it affect, right? Because it kind of correlates with like the perspective of like business and life and the physical side of things, right? Because like I was just talking about this with Jesse. Every morning I take an ice cold shower because it's the most uncomfortable thing to do when you wake up. It is freezing. It sucks. You're shivering, but you're in and out, and immediately you're from dead to awake, no matter what you do, right? And if you can't get past one cold shower in the morning, what else are you gonna struggle for the rest of the day? And so I wanted to make a point here is if you can get past an Ironman, because I know how difficult they are. I've looked into them, right? Which is kind of why I'm also like I'm intrigued by the fact that I wonder if I can get through one. And the same thing as how hard it would get through to one. And then what else can I succeed after I get through to one? Right? Like you never know where you're going to get to that next level, which is why I asked. So I love your perspective behind it.
Yeah, it just gives you a mental strength and discipline too, because you can't get to an Ironman and do an Ironman without being disciplined in your structure and being disciplined in workouts and being disciplined with your food. So it mentally strengthens you. And I think, I've just recently started doing yoga and meditation, and they call those a practice, right? You don't have ever have it dialed and finished. And I think with the Ironman and the disciplines and the we talked about the masterminds, all that kind of stuff is the practice of life. And Ed Milet, I'll say this. I know we're getting short on time, but Ed Milet has this story, and I don't know if you guys have heard this, about what he believes happens when you die. And what he said, it's different than what most people think. He said, I believe that when you die and you go to the pearly gates, St. Peter immediately introduces you to somebody. And he introduces you to the person who you had the potential to be. And so it's up to you to decide how close to that person you are. He said, my goal, and it's my goal too, because my goal is that when I meet that person, he looks me in the eye, shakes my hand, and says, well done, right? And I'm going to say, I've been chasing your ass my whole life. And most people float through life instead of thinking about who they want to be and what they want their life to look like, and allow that vision to pull them in that direction. And so all the things that we've talked about with the mastermind and the Ironman, and I actually built a cold plunge in my house, so I have a cold plunge. I do that every day. Also, is a cold plunge is all those things are just growth on the journey that we call life. And wherever you want to be, money-wise, health-wise, family-wise, love-wise, whatever that is, if you begin with the end in mind and know what you want, and then are on a constant and never-ending journey to get to that place, you have the ability to live and enjoy a really, really big, full life. And I think there's a difference between being rich and being wealthy. And one is a state of account, one is a state of mind. Now, truthfully, I want to be both. But I would much rather I'm wealthy, right? I'm what a lot of people would consider rich, but I'm wealthy. I lead a big life. I surround myself with people that care about me, that pull me along in their journey, that I love being around, and I'm constantly looking for more of those people so that I can have a bigger life. Because the bigger my life is, the more people that I can help, and the more people that I can bring on the journey that I may not, that I'm so fortunate to have had people pull me, on my journey as well.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. I got to tell you, like I've said this a couple times today, but this is by far my favorite conversation I've had with anybody on this show. Aaron, you're amazing.
Oh, that means
you're
a
awesome.
lot, man. Thank you very much.
And no, thank you for coming on. I really appreciate you coming on. This was great. I didn't know where it was going to go. And this, by far, my favorite conversation I've had with anybody. I love your perspective behind anything. So we're getting to the top of the hour. I got to ask you, the questions we ask, 2 questions at the end of every show, being that this is the big break show. What was your big break in life or in business or in whatever you want to talk about? It doesn't have to be what you've brought up today that got you from a certain level in your life to the next one.
It was selling my house in 2007. I don't even know if I can tell this story without getting emotional, but So I'd gotten into real estate. Before we had gotten into real estate, we had bought our dream house. I mean, it was the end of the court. We had 2 boys. The school was at the end of the court, super wide street, single story pool, third of an acre, which in California is a lot. I mean, it was our dream house, but it was a huge nut every single month, right? And so I got into real estate and I was able to make it, but it was barely, and it was bricks on my shoulder. There was just this constant over my head of how much it was costing for me to just live my life. So this is before short sales. This is before everything went sideways. And in the town that I live in Ripon, it's it's an upper middle class town. So everybody owns their house, everybody picks up their kids from school, all that kind of stuff. And it took my wife and I a couple of months, solid months, where I could see where the market was going, that we were heading towards something that was gonna go down, and B, I just knew there was no way that I was going to be able to build a business without having the freedom of taking that burden off of my shoulders. So after many, many bottles of wine, it was the first time that I had really intentionally separated the emotion from the business decision side of things. So I had to separate the emotion of that house and what it meant. My wife still hasn't driven by that house, and that was 2007. So that was 15 years ago, because that was the house that we were planning on being in for a long time. But separating that and making that decision, the hard decision of selling our house and then renting for the next 2 years so that we could build a business and that we could, was my big break. And again, it goes back to the perspective that I'd gotten from the people that I trusted. I mean, I went out to a bunch of people. I got all of their opinions. I had a couple that said, you need to keep that house because your back's against the wall, right? And then the ones that I really trusted and cared about were like, you need to get out of your own way. You need to put pride aside. You need to make the right decision for you to be able to start building the life that you want to. And you need to sell that house. And we sold that house. So for me, the big break was actually the hardest decision that I've ever made in my life, was selling that house. And other than marrying my wife, the best decision that I've ever made in my entire life was selling that house.
I love that. Thanks for sharing that, man.
Yeah, that's a really good perspective. We've never heard that before. But so with selling the house, was that like you probably live in your dream house now?
You know what? We bought a really great house in 2012, so I got a screaming deal on it. We've more than tripled the value of the house since then, and it fits everything that we're looking for. And we've looked at big houses and dream houses and all that kind of stuff, and I've thought, why would I change my life now when I can use that money to build the life that I want to live down the road? So we just made the decision that we're going to stay in this house. It's allowed us to buy Airbnbs and houses in other areas that we can go use anytime we want to. So I'm good right now.
It's awesome.
I love that, man. Yeah, awesome, Aaron. I think that's fantastic. So one of the other questions we have, anybody listening today, and you brought a bunch of really philosophical ideas and your mindset, and which is one of the reasons why I like having you. I wanted you to be on the show, because I follow what you do. And what piece of advice, an actionable step that somebody could take today, whether they're in real estate, whether they're in something that somebody could do today in order to kind of move forward in life with real estate or entrepreneurship mindset. An actionable step that somebody could take.
So I'll give you a couple. One is you need to start reading books that can help you on that journey. Atomic Habits is a really great book. How to Win Friends and Influence People. Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Those are all books that if you're at the start of your journey are going to give you a perspective and open up your mind to the opportunities that are out there. The second thing that I would say is learn how to write real goals. Most people write goals that are results. They say, I want to do an Ironman, or I want to lose 10 pounds, or I want to make $1 million this year. Those are the results. The goals are actually the activities that you can track to help you get that goal, to get that result. And so I would say open up your perspective by reading books, and then find and learn how to write goals that you can use that will help you achieve the results that you want to get.
Aaron, it's crazy. You know, those are the first 3 books I read that got me into my whole investing journey. I kid you not. Those exact 3 books.
It's the one of my mentors said once, he said, principles don't change, tactics do, right? We're in a totally different world from 2005 and 99. The principles that you use to get wealthy, the other one too, which changed my life financially, was Richest Man in Babylon. So that is a really great book too. Those are 4 books that I think if someone reads those 4 books, their life can't help but be on a different trajectory.
Yeah. I love it, man.
That's awesome. And Aaron, you read books. I follow you on Instagram. You read what, like 4 or 5 books a month? Was that your goal?
I 28 books a year. That's my goal. Is 28 books this year is what I'll read.
Nice.
28 books a year. So there it is, folks. Aaron takes cold baths. He's got an ice maker in the back of his house that he lays in. He hangs out with Richard Branson. He doesn't involve himself in real estate anymore. Dude, that's all. We got to have you back on because we didn't even touch base on short-term rentals. I mean, everybody listening to the show, you got to follow this guy because he has such perspective that you guys will hear today. I'm super. I want to be your intern, man. I want to learn from you. Like you're exactly what I would picture a mentor to be like when I was starting off. You're that guy, and I think that's probably why you've built successful teams is because you come across as a very regular, humbled guy, but you also talk about money in the sense that it's money, and then you talk about the mental perspective of it, the health perspective of it. So you kind of come full circle where people might not be less intimidated. So you have a really good calming effect in a way that I'm pretty sure you're good at training people, man. So that's why you got these $1 million teams.
Thank you very much. That means a lot. And you can find me on Instagram. It's theaaron.west. I'm sure you guys can put a link in there when you post it on the show. But anything I can do to help, I'm happy to help. Reach out anytime, guys. You know I got mad love for you guys.
Thank you, Aaron. Appreciate it. Thanks for coming on, man.
Yeah.
My pleasure.
Appreciate it, man.